uh, students of the 2012 batch of TAPME. And a very special congratulations to all of you. It was worth the effort to give you all the medal and the degree. Exactly 1 week ago, almost to the minute, I, as the chairman of the Board of Governors of IIM Lucknow, presided over the function in Lucknow, and it has brought out to me today what is the difference in traditions between the north and the south of India. In Lucknow, all the hard work is done by the chairman of the Board of Governors, like distributing all the degrees. There were 500 of them, and you can imagine the condition of my right hand after I had finished those. So I was looking forward to a pleasant sit down and watch Dr. Pai go through the rigors. But traditions are traditions, and I was told that in the south it is different. It's the chief guest who does all that. So I said, okay, I'll always follow traditions. And how many are there? 180. There were 500. So I said, okay, roughly 1/3. Not too bad. But then, here it's a double-barreled effort. You have to put the medal on each person also. There was nothing like that. Just hand over the degree, and it was done like a machine gun, continuous thing. So ultimately, the time taken was exactly the same. 45 minutes there, 45 minutes here. But that does not stop me from congratulating all of you on your achievements, and also, in a way, congratulating your parents and your other friends and relatives who are here. And I see that some prospective candidates for future years of, shall we say, very, shall we say, minors are also present in this auditorium. So obviously, in another 20 years from now, they will be taking this degree. I thought a lot about what to talk to you about, and I realized that as some of you, I think it was the other batch, isn't it, which I talked to earlier, the first year batch, that you know a lot more about economics and marketing and finance and HR and so on than I would ever hope to know. So I can't talk to you about that. And then I realized that what I know something about steel making and mining, you would not be interested in that either. So I decided that I would talk about something which the country needs very badly, and that is leadership. You might think that we have enough leaders. There are leaders in political parties. There are leaders in NGOs. Now we've got the social leaders also who decide on which way the country would be going. There are leaders everywhere. But leadership is lacking. That may sound to be opposite views, so to speak, but leadership really consists of some qualities which unfortunately our leaders at this moment of time could well imbibe from you. You are our future leaders, and therefore I will try to talk about leadership. I will start off by a quote from Mr. J.R.D. Tata, who was the doyen of the house and my professional mentor, so to speak. He always said, always strive for excellence in whatever you do, or even perfection, and never be satisfied with second best. And I think that's a very good advice that I can give you, that in whatever you do, please put the objective first. You know, the difference between Japan, I was telling some of your colleagues, junior colleagues today that Japan and India is that in Japan, all the leaders think of the country first. Secondly, they think of the community or the company. And thirdly, they think about themselves. In India, I hope I'm not offending anyone if I say that we do exactly the reverse. We think of ourselves first, and then maybe the company or the community, and finally country. Oh yes, we get together only at the time when there is an external threat. That time all of India unites, but otherwise we think only in terms of our sectarian views, whether it is religion, whether it is caste, whatever it may be, but we don't think of the country as a whole. I would like you to take a pledge today amongst all the other pledges that you have taken to think of the country first, because only if the country progresses, we will progress with it. And the situation just now, and I'm not referring to any political party or any part of India, though something can be written about each and every part of India, including this part, Karnataka, that we should think in terms of leadership, and we should think in terms of how to move forward and not worry too much about what is happening to ourselves, our caste, and our immediate, shall we say, domains. To be a leader, one has to have several qualities, and I will touch upon a few of them. The first thing that I think all of you, and we look forward to you all to lead India into the future, all of you must have a plan of what you want to accomplish in your life. Do you want to be a multimillionaire and own race horses and planes? Or do you want to be of service to the country? I think, and this is what I'm saying now is from the Tata Group, is that we have recognized that every business, and you all are going to be business leaders of the future, must generate wealth. In other words, must make a profit. You know, it was said in the socialist days of India, Nehru himself said it, that don't talk to me of profit, profit is a dirty word. But to generate anything, to do anything, one must have wealth. That's the first principle I think all management students must have, that you must help whichever organization you are in to generate wealth. The PI organization here is a classic example of having generated wealth but not having used it for their own benefit. Once wealth is generated, I always told my workers in Jamshedpur that you can't do anything if your pockets are empty. Then you can only generate hot air. And there are plenty of those in our capital cities. So we don't have to contribute to that, generating hot air. But we can generate goodwill and we can be of benefit to the rest of the country. So once you generate wealth, you have two options. One is that you use that wealth for your personal aggrandizement, great weddings with elephants and horses, plenty of jewelry, wasted food, buy yachts, build 20-story mansions for yourself and your family. All that is one way. You have generated it, and you have the right to use that wealth in the way that you would wish to use it. The second way is to generate wealth and use it for the benefit of the community, like what we see in Manipur. Educational institutions, hospitals, good infrastructure, various facilities which benefits the community as a whole. Earlier this morning, I was telling some of your friends, the junior friends, of how Tatas have generated wealth and why they are not being harassed by Naxalites or extremists or leftists or Maoists or whatever you call them. We have no problems with them. because we have given our wealth back to the nation. In fact, it's a credo of ours that what comes from the people goes back to the people, hopefully magnified several times over. And we've had though we operate in Jharkhand in some of the most, shall we say, radically infested regions like Hazaribagh. Managing the MP of Hazaribagh is my good friend Mr. Yashwant Sinha. And very often he has asked me that how come Tata people go there into Hazaribagh unhindered, unprotected, no security, and do their work without even a day's hindrance, whereas others, including me, need posses of police to go into our own constituency. And the answer is very simple. This is what I told them, that we started 40, 50 years back in that region. And even before we started work, we started looking after those people, looking after them in case times of illness, looking after them when the rains did not come, provided them with water, provided them with some basic education, transport, roads and so on. So the people realized that their benefits to the community, which unfortunately the government could not give, were coming from the House of Tata, and they have left us alone. And we have operated there very satisfactorily and have, shall we say, benefited the country and ourselves also. We have made a lot of, we have created a lot of wealth in that area, and we have succeeded. So one thing is that you have to look after the community, and that is one of the facets of leadership. One other classic thing about leaders is that you have to tell the truth about current reality. There is a saying in English that you can fool most people all the time and all people most of the time, but not all people all the time. You are bound to be found out. And it is something which I think our leaders must imbibe, is that they must have the courage of their convictions and tell the truth. If things are bad, so what? Do the things which others would not want to do. Do the tough things. Don't pass the buck up. One of the American presidents you might have read, I don't remember which one, had a paperweight on his table saying the buck stops here. The buck stops at your table also. Don't pass it on to your bosses, and don't certainly blame the people who are below you for all the faults that may occur. In the end, it pays off to accept responsibility and to say that, look, I could have done something better. And if by chance you do something well and you get praise, pass that on to your subordinates. There is nothing lost, no cost at all in boosting up the confidence of your subordinates. So take the blame and give the praise. That would be, I think, a true quality of a good leader. Nowadays, we have plenty of coalitions, not only in politics, but everywhere else. I think a leader has to learn how to manage coalitions and, if necessary, restructure. I was reading in only recently that one of the Japanese prime ministers, not too far back, about 10 years ago, faced a revolt in his own party. I think it was something to do with banking or post office or something like that. He wanted to do something for the good of the country. And the rest of the party, the old people, so to speak, the wise old head said, no, you can't do it. What did he do? He didn't buckle down and go in for second-rate reforms. He took the challenge, resigned, called for midterm elections, and told the country that, look, I'm going for midterm elections because this is so. He threw out all the obstructionists from his party, all the oldies who were standing in it, gave the tickets to the young people, and when the election came, the country realized what he was trying to do, and he came in with a thumping majority. All the oldies were thrown out. Oldies not in age, but oldies in thought. So think progressively, think of the future, and don't worry too much about what the repercussions should be. Because if the people realize that you're trying to do something good, they will support you. And that has happened many a time. We've had that recent example, if I may say so, in Jharkhand, in my own hometown. We had a young man there. 15 years ago, he was in charge of the police. And when he came as a young policeman, we worked together, and he threw out all the gundas and the hoodlums and the various other characters who were trying to take a grip on the city. He was successful in throwing them out. 15 years later, he decided to stand as an MP from that area. I heard about it when I was in the USA, and I told my wife, who's here, that poor Ajoy, he will lose his deposit. He doesn't know what he's trying to do. These politicians will get him. You know what the result was? Everyone else lost their deposit, and he came in with a thumping majority. I was delighted that I was wrong, because though 15 years had elapsed, those people whom he had supported and whom he had helped did not forget, even the lowly common people, so to speak, and they voted him into that MP's position. He's now a member of parliament. What he will do with the remaining 541, I don't know, but he is there. So there is hope. So for those who stand by their convictions, and that is what the leadership is all about. By the way, I asked the police people, it's a force of about 3,000 in Jamshedpur, that what has happened? Why has this one man changed your whole attitude? Because they were the same. He was only one. Lalu Prasad had sent him at my request. He came afresh 15 years back. The police force was the same. And a leader cannot achieve anything unless he has the following and the followers do what he wants them to do. So I asked them, what is it that you saw in him? And the answer was very simple. They said, Dr. Irani, he gave us back our pride. Right. And because of that, they followed him, and Jamshedpur today is a much better place to live in than it was 15 years ago, law and order wise. Another thing which a leader has to provide is to provide a vision. I saw the vision and mission statements here. They are very good. And, but they have to be shared. No one, not even the chief executive, and you all hopefully will be chief executives one day, can take it for granted that my vision is the vision which the company has to follow. No, it has to be a shared vision. When we decided to write the vision for Tata Steel, you know, after the economic reform started in 1991, that was a very notable period in the history. I suppose most of you were kiddies at that time. But in 1991, Manmohan Singh as finance minister, Chidambaram as Minister of Economics, Commerce Minister, and Narasimha Rao, the Prime Minister, ushered in a series of reforms which have seen that the country has benefited. And there, once again, it was a matter of leadership from those few people at the top. And the rest of the country responded because they knew that we were almost bankrupt. And then, I think, as they say, the rest is history. India is now becoming one of the major economic powers of the world. One other thing which the leader has to do is to create endless opportunities for communication. Gone are the days where you can sit in your ivory tower. Maybe a scientist can do that, a musician can do it. But leaders of people cannot sit in ivory towers and dictate from there. They have to be in touch with the masses. They have to communicate. So you have to be good communicators, and you have to encourage two-way communication, not just give diktats. That's one way of communicating. It's a very inferior way. The correct way is to spend time with your people and communicate in a two-way system. Hear what they've said. It's very easy to hear, by the way. Listening is more difficult. There's a difference between hearing and listening. Because we've got ears, because sound waves always travel even round corners, you cannot help but hear. But are you listening? Listening to the voice that is coming from the people. I think some of the election results which have recently come up have elaborated this very well. You know, UP, for example, a lot was said of one party or the other, but another party heard what the people were saying, and that party has now come up trumps. So it is very important to hear, to understand what is happening, and do what your followers want you to do. And ultimately, one has to maintain focus. There are too many things. I feel sorry for the poor Prime Minister, for that matter, for most chief ministers. How many things they have to listen to, and how many, shall we say, agencies and how many sectors they have to provide succor to. But things like priorities are important. And I think people will understand if you focus on something.